the terrible demonstrations and confrontation and violence in Charlottesville, and Kareem said we have to have something, we have to have a public conversation. And Yahaira had already initiated 9 months earlier a coalition, what we called the Faculty Diversity Coalition, and so I called a meeting with the Faculty Diversity Coalition and we started talking about this.
Right, the possibilities, and prior to that, I had already met with Alicia as well. And Alicia had said, I want to start this kind of series. And so that stayed in the back of my mind, like, how do we kind of bring this together? And I said, well, I can talk to the Faculty Diversity Coalition and somehow we can come up with ideas for that and we can come together. And I think that from our meeting through the Faculty Diversity Coalition, we came up with a couple points and sent them to Alicia, who kind of was already building this infrastructure for fearless conversation.
Right, and Kathy and I were already talking around the same lines of what can be done that might counteract something that we usually see in the mainstream media, and so we got together.
Yeah, definitely. I was most interested in getting some kind of discourse going on campus that would counter this kind of angry discourse that we hear in media and the larger political climate.
Plus, I think, given the kind of climate that it came out of, it was also an effort to create a space where students could have these kinds of conversation outside of, the pressure of grades, and a safe space to really discuss some of the topics that they were encountering in the news on social media, but probably didn't have any outlets or any kind of feedback to kind of provide that environment for it.
The whole notion of the fearless conversation, right? Of having to tackle issues that make people uncomfortable and figuring out how can we do it in a space that will allow people to talk about them, but be informative. I think, some of the things that I was concerned with too is this isn't a time where we build coalitions in some ways, and that's kind of part of the idea too, of figuring out how do we make these conversations come across board, like how do we have different individuals involved that are concerned with the same things, to kind of open it up and kind of model it, not just in the topics, but the people we invite to be part of the panels, to make sure that those panels are as diverse and inclusive as we can make them.
I would say as we're trying to build an inclusive environment, it's really crucial that we begin to have conversations that, as I said, make us uncomfortable, that challenge us to think in new ways, that allow us to learn from each other, and get a new perspective. And so I think it'll add to that initiative of trying to create an inclusive environment.
It's a response to obviously the outside climate that we're in, right? The kind of political climate and what we're seeing, right? But it's also a response to the fact that often I think we can be very stagnant with ideas of what diversity and inclusion mean. And so that we can kind of be operating on a paradigm that's outdated, that really isn't reflecting what is the reality of what the university is now, with the different groups and the different notions of what diversity is. So, I think that we can get complicit and kind of just think, or complacent, and just kind of thinking, oh, this is diversity, and it's actual work to constantly reevaluate what diversity means, how we define it, and also the other element, which is the inclusion. Just because you have diverse people doesn't mean you're necessarily inclusive, right? So you actually have to go the extra mile, which is to have those conversations, to kind of say, to give outlets to people that don't feel necessarily included.
I think also related to inclusion, we've talked about in the future getting non-university voices on the panels as well, like going out into the community, getting non-faculty, non-staff, non-students to talk about their experiences related to diversity and inclusion and these kind of hard topics that we need to discuss.
I think it's still evolving. Every conversation we think of something new, it kind of changes, and certainly we don't run out of material to talk about.
I want the participants to learn a lot about a subject, about a topic that's difficult, but I also want them to realize that we can actually agree to disagree, but be civil about that argument or discourse. We're not trying to persuade anyone to our side necessarily, our individual side. We want people to be able to have like a free discussion and argue in a very civil manner with each other.
Sometimes it is very hard to have that free discussion, right? I think the idea is just to kind of that even if you arrive there with not an open mind, that you leave there with an open mind.
With the university's direction and Office of Diversity, what we're trying to do here as a group, I think is so critical to that, to see this kind of a diversity on all these multiple levels in action, right? In thought, in representation, of the different views, maybe styles of presentation that is being represented here in what we're trying